Hello and welcome, CTS266 Section 840 students for the Spring 2016 semester at Anne Arundel Community College. Just a quick note, we are definitely snowed out and class is canceled for tomorrow evening, Monday, January 25th. So just a quick note there that due to all the snow that we got, the school has closed down and I'm looking to set up a live stream session to substitute for the lecture. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But again, class is canceled, so there'll be no class tomorrow. All right, so what is this video tutorial going to be all about? Well, this is the baseline lab that we would be doing tomorrow evening. And what the baseline lab is going to cover is how to basically wipe a switch config properly and completely, setting it back to its factory default settings. And then we're also going to do a tickle script, TCL script, on putting some baseline configuration information into the switches that we would also like to have. Now, I would highly recommend, that if you haven't already, you take a look at Sublime Text, which is this tool that I have right here. This is probably one of the best tools out there on the market. You can actually download a copy for free, and I think you get a 15-day trial. Or if that is not something in your budget, please take a look at Notepad++ or just simply Notepad would work just fine for you. And what we're doing here is we're creating these tickle scripts or TCL scripts that are going to allow us to tear down the configuration on the switch, set it to the factory defaults, and then throw some baseline settings on there. Remember, we're going to be dealing with 4 Cisco switches throughout the semester, and so to have to go through and clean up the config information on each of the 4 switches prior to starting your lab, just not economical to have to do that in a manual fashion, running all these commands that you see that I have here in the TCL script right now. So I like to call mine, this is lab 3-1 3750 switch Windex script. It's going to wipe it clean. And then we've got the base config script here, where we're just going to set a default host name, the domain name. We're going to say no domain lookup, so no DNS resolution. That way, in case we mistype something to the command line, you don't get that translating error where you have to sit for 5 to 10 seconds waiting to get the CLI back. We're going to set the VTP mode to transparent, something we'll be talking a lot about throughout the semester. And then most importantly, we're going to make sure here that the console line does not log us out. That's the no exec timeout, so we never get logged off. And when log messages are being thrown up on the screen, we're going to get the command line prompt back if we were typing a command in the middle of a log message coming up. Typically that will hose up your display, your CLI command. You'll see that it gets all hosed up and you can't read what's there. Logging synchronous is going to take care of that for us. So we're going to start at step 2 here, and what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a configuration or a deconfiguration of the switch initially. Now I just finished up another series here for another project, so I do have some good VLAN information and things like that that I can find on these switches that we're going to be able to delete. So I'm going to go from user exec to privilege exec, and again I'm starting at step 2 in the baseline student lab. If I were to simply say dir by itself, and if I do a question mark, you can see there's a lot of choices. If I were to say dir/all, that's going to list out all file systems that I have here. You can see that I've got a directory, and this is a directory that I like to create on all those switches and routers that I work with, and then underneath this directory I'll create individual subdirectories where I can keep specific information, maybe backup configurations, maybe tickle scripts. Here is the iOS. So as you can see, all 4 of these switches are 3750s. They're all running IP services K9, which means we've got the crypto, and it's 12255 SE10, which for this line of switches is the latest and greatest. Now, what are we interested in here? So step 2, we need to delete the VLAN.dat file. The reason we need to get rid of this is if I were to type show VLAN brief, you're going to see that at one point we had about 100 VLANs on here. You see all the VLANs that are there? You'll notice they're all active. So when we go to reload the switch, if I don't delete the VLAN.dat file right here, what's going to end up happening is that all of those VLANs are going to be on the switch. Now, if that's what you want, then certainly don't delete it. But again, we're talking about setting the switch back to its factory defaults. So let's get rid of the VLAN.dat file. So I'm going to say delete. Now, I can put /:, right? Because you can see what directory are we in. However, this is a lot of extra typing. By default, the CLI in Cisco iOS assumes that the command that you're running is going to affect something in the flash file system. So simply typing delete VLAN.dat achieves the same thing. So we're going to go with the shortened form here. And again, it asks us to confirm the file name. And we say delete VLAN.dat. Now, when I type dir, you'll notice that the configuration, that VLAN.dat config file, is now gone. So what if I say show VLAN brief? Do we see those 100 VLANs? Well, we do. Because remember, these are in the running configuration. Now, when the switch reloads, that VLAN.dat file is no longer there. So the VLANs would no longer be there. But right now, they still show up. All right. So step 2 was delete the VLAN.dat file if it was present, and we did that. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to erase the startup configuration. Now, on Cisco devices, the startup configuration is usually an NVRAM. So if I were to type dir and put the question mark here, you can see we have a choice for NVRAM. If I say dir and hit enter, you'll notice we see config.txt, but there is no startup config here. So let's go ahead and say dir NVRAM : and what do we have? So there it is. There is the startup config. So we've confirmed that the startup config is actually in NVRAM. Now, a quick note that files, typically files, especially on switches, typically files that appear to be in the NVRAM. So you see I typed dir NVRAM, and it says that these are the files that are in NVRAM. Now, typically on switches, files that appear to be in the NVRAM are actually stored in the flash file system, right? So the lab gives us some examples. The config.txt maps to the startup config. So in the flash directory, this config.txt, and we can see, take a look there, 2128, and it just happens to be the same size. And let's go ahead, and I'm using, I used to use Desk Scribble. I've actually switched over. I just found this the other day. I wish I would have found this years ago. This is called Ink2Go, I-N-K, the number 2 and G-O, and this has got to be one of the best and most versatile screen annotation applications for the Mac that I have ever seen. So you're going to see this throughout the semester, and that's actually what's allowing me to put my watermark down here for the Anne Arundel Community College in the lower right-hand corner. So this is called Ink2Go. So again, let's go ahead and we'll go with green here. So you can see that right here, that is the size of the file. So 2,128 bytes. Now, there's no coincidence that the size of that file just happens to be, or I should say the size of the startup config just happens to be the same size as the config.txt. Because again, remember, they are the same file. So again, files that appear to be in the NVRAM are actually stored in the flash file system. So it kind of gives you the illusion, or it presents the illusion that, oh, there's two different files here. One's in NVRAM, one's in flash, and they've got different names. So therefore, they must be different files, when in fact, they're actually the same file. So again, the config.txt maps to the startup-config. And let's take a look up here in the, we'll start down here. The private config.txt which just happens to be 1,933 bytes in size, actually maps itself, or I should say it's the other way around, that the file here, the private config that we see in NVRAM, right? This file is also 1,933 bytes in size. Again, it's the same file. So we know what the startup config contains. It contains a copy of the last configuration that we saved. Well, what about the private config? Well, the private config stores sensitive information such as the master password encryption key, your RSA keys, if we've generated any RSA keys. So again, we want to make sure that these files are wiped off the system when we go to reload it. Now, this is the squeegee here on Ink to Go. So if I hit that, you can see it clears the screen right off for me. All I need to do is click the cursor, and it brings me back into being able to control my actual secure CRT window here. All right, so very important command. How can you tell, right? So we see here that we've proven conclusively that these files are simply just representations. The files in the NVRAM are simply representations, right, of the actual stored file, which is in flash. And so that's what they're doing there. So how do I know if that's the case? Well, if I were to say show version and pipe it to include volatile, and I did not spell that right, volatile. There we go. And so what does it say here? We have 512 kilobytes, right? So half a megabyte of flash simulated NVRAM. So there it is right there. So on your switching platform of choice, whatever the switch is that you're using, if you issue this show version include volatile, this is going to tell you whether or not you have dedicated volatile memory, or if you simply have 500, or I should say whatever the amount may be, of flash simulated NVRAM. And so when we say simulated, this is exactly what we mean, is that when you type in dir NVRAM, it's going to show you some files here. However, these are simulated. This storage space is simulated, and these files are actually being stored here with these different names, right? Okay, so great explanation there as to why you see two different file names, why you see two different file systems. So the question then is, well, Travis, how do I get rid of those files? Do I delete them out of NVRAM, or do I delete them out of flash? The answer to that is, if you delete them out of NVRAM, it's going to delete both of those files. If you delete them out of flash, it's going to delete both of those files. So it's your choice. Again, the easiest thing to do is to erase them, I believe, so that you don't have to type NVRAM, is to erase them in flash. Because remember, if I wanted to erase it, and let's choose startup config, if I were to type in delete startup-config and hit enter, what directory is it assuming I'm talking about here? Exactly. It assumes I'm talking about the flash directory. So when I hit enter, and then it says delete flash : you can see right here it drops it in there and tells you, yeah, you didn't type a directory in, so I'm assuming you're talking about flash. I hit confirm, it's going to tell me no such file or directory. Because again, the name of that file is actually config.txt in the flash directory. So if I wanted to delete it out of NVRAM, I would literally have to type delete NVRAM : and then startup-config. So I say that to point this out, is to simply type in delete config.txt. That to me is easier than having to type in the NVRAM and the colon and then startup-config. And remember, when I type dir now, you see config.txt is gone. Well, what happened in NVRAM colon, oops, sorry about that, I did not deleting, Control C. We wanted to show NVRAM. Let's look at NVRAM, and you can see that we lost a ton of files, and we still, right, it got rid of all of these files down here when we deleted it, although we're left with the startup config, and we're left with the private config, and that is it. So that gets rid of the startup config when you delete the config.txt, right? So when we reload, it will not be there, because remember, these are simply pointers out of NVRAM. These are just pointers to the actual stored file in flash. So when we reload, this would be this file will still be here, but it will not contain the contents that it does right now. So that gets rid of the startup config. And then let's go ahead and get rid of that private config .txt. So I would say delete, and then private-config.txt. Again, it assumes it's going to be deleted out of the flash directory. I type dir, and it is gone. All right, so the last file that we need to account for here to ensure that this goes back to factory defaults is going to be the multiple-fs. Now, this is one of the interesting files. So this file, the multiple-fs, actually holds on to different contents, I believe, and let me take a quick look here. So the private config file holds onto your certificates, any like an X509 certificate. I'm sorry, the other NVRAM files in NVRAM, such as like a self-generated X509 certificate, those are all stored in the multiple FS file. So it's that multiple FS file that's going to be holding on to like an X509 cert of some kind that would have been created maybe for your HTTPS server if you were running HTTPS on the switch. So we want to definitely get rid of any of those certificates as well. So we would type in delete in multiple-fs, and there we go. Now, you'll notice that all of those files are gone. So at this point, the only thing left for me to do is to reload the switch. So I would type in reload. Now, I'm pretty sure that I have some changes that have been made. So let's see exactly. So if you see this, right, you don't want to save the modification changes, because if I type yes and hit enter, it's going to actually save the running configuration off for me, and when this comes back up, that running configuration is going to be on the switch. So I would want to say, no, I've made configuration changes, do not save those configuration changes. And so I would hit no, and I'm going to hit Control C here to bail out of that right now, because what we're going to do is we're going to talk about basically automating that. So let's pull up Sublime Text here. So here is a script that I've written. Again, this is going to be a very good idea to have this handy at the beginning of the semester. So let's talk about some of the things that we see here, and let's switch this over to green. Some of the things that we see here in the output. So we start it with TCLSH, right? Anything that begins with the hash signs or the pound signs, these are comments. The first command, we're going to put a file. So I'm going to open in the flash directory underneath vault, TP-Bonfy, CCMP, switch version 7-1, baseline-lab. So that is where the directory ends. So here's where the directory name starts. There's where it ends. That is the name of my script, right? So baseline lab 3750 switch Windex script. And again, I'm on 3750s. In the lab, we're going to have 3560 V2s and 2960 switches that we'll be using. Now this type ahead basically says the next command that I run is going to ask me to confirm. And this type ahead command right here is going to go ahead and enter a return character for me. So it's going to simulate me hitting the enter key. Now, this command that's here, copy running config, startup config, you could also use write memory here as well. And again, this is a comment, just annotating that. So then I'm going to hit type ahead again, and actually I should probably bring that type ahead right down here when I type in erase startup config. Now, I could have also typed in write erase instead of erase startup config. Both commands do the same thing. And then you can see I forced the deletion of the VLAN.dat. I forced the deletion of the multiple FS. And then on multi-layer switches, right? So this will be for the 3560s. This command right here will not go into your tickle script for the 2960s. The 2960s we have are incapable of routing, right? But these multi-layer switches we have, we want to set them so that they are dual IPv4 and IPv6 capable, and we do that with our switch database manager. And this is the command to make that happen. The last thing that we're going to do is we're going to put a message to the screen, and it's also going to be sent to the switch log. And if you were running some sort of a syslog server like a SolarWinds or a What's Up Gold, then it would also log the message to that syslog server. And the reason we want to do that is because if you were in a production environment, you want to make sure that scripts that are being run, you know when those are being run, and hopefully it is your admin that's running them. And so again, this is just a reload command here. And if we were to type reload cancel after we issue this command, let's say we realize, no, we can't do that. We're in this is production environment, middle of the day. You can simply type reload cancel, and I'm going to demonstrate all of that for you. All right, so this is the basic script here. Something I really, really like about the switches, as opposed to, let's Windex that off. Something I really like about the switches, as opposed to the routers, is that the comments that we have here, all these comments that begin with the pound sign, these will stay in the file when I put this on the switch. On the routers, and maybe it's just the 1841s, although on the 2901 series I've seen the same behavior, the comments get filtered out. So what do we do now that we have this TCLSH? We open this file in the flash under that directory those directories right there. This is the name of my file. Here are all the commands. And again, quick caveat, if you have to go into global config, you need to precede the command with ios_config. If it's not a command that you go into global config for, if it's a command that you run from privilege exec, you simply type the command, right? And we're going to see here on the baseline config where if you have, like when you go under interface configuration mode or you go into the console line, you simply just stack the commands and then the sub-commands on the same line. All right, so here's our script. What do we do? Well, first you would have to create these directories if you haven't done so already. Now, for the lab in the class, it's probably going to be easiest if you simply just go ahead and put it in the main flash directory. Again, I prefer putting them in subdirectories to organize things nice and neat, but I've just pulled back all those directories. So this is literally going to put the script in the flash directory. So when I go to run it, I simply just type in baseline-lab-3750-switch-windex-script.tcl. Again, you could even, let's do this. We can even shrink it down to Windex-script. Again, it's up to you what you want to name it, right? So what do? We grab it. I'm going to grab all of my comments. I copy it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to come over to switch 4, and I'm just simply going to paste it. Now, we need to do this from privilege exec mode. If I tried to do this from user exec with the greater than sign, it's not going to work. And then I click paste. So we can see here it drops all of my information in there, right? So let's type in dir, and what do we have? Windex script.tcl. So if I wanted to view the contents of what's in a Tickle script, I simply type more, and since we're at the flash level here, this is going to assume I want to see something in the flash directory. I just type in more space the name of the script. And there it is. And it will actually run it through what I'm pretty sure is the Unix more utility here. And it allows me to see the script. So again, I can investigate this script to see, who created it. You could put in your name and things like that at the top and a comment. And more importantly, what is this script actually going to do? Because the last thing you want is for a junior admin to jump on your switch, type in dir, and say, oh, what does windex-script.tcl do? Oh, I'm sorry. I would have to forgot to type tclsh. So, and we haven't, so this is a fortuitous failure here. So what you just saw right here is I type in the script name, but I didn't precede it with tclsh. So what the iOS interprets that to be is, oh, I'm trying to type a host name in here. So you can see it says translating, it's trying to resolve the name to the IP. And this is what the command in the other script, which was no IP domain lookup, it prevents this from happening. Because as you can see, we had to sit here for 5 to 10 seconds waiting for this to air out, right? So let's take a step back. Your junior admin gets on here and he says, oh yeah, I've done some Tickle scripting. So let's see what this windex-script.tcl is going to do. And you hit enter, and what is it doing? It's removing all of the config files, and now within 1 minute, it's going to reload the switch. So again, you want to make sure that you've got some good comments in any Tickle scripts that you have there, so that something like this doesn't happen by accident. Now again, what would we need to type? Well, the switch is going to reload. I just simply need to type reload cancel. So if I were to say reload, if I do a question mark, you can see that cancel is one of the options. And there we go. The shutdown has been aborted. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to drop this script in. Let's get into privilege exec mode on all of these switches. And let's make sure we look the same here on all the switches. So we're in privilege exec on all of the switches from 1 through 4. I'm going to simply grab the script again, and I'm just going to dump it in here on all 4 of my switches. And I'm using Secure CRT. You can see this command window. It says send to all sessions. It's very small here in the bottom. But this is what I love about Secure CRT. So let's confirm. Did it get dumped into every window? Yep, switch 2, switch 3, and switch 4. So again, Secure CRT, great tool. We're going to be using PuTTY. But again, in your professional, personal careers, not a bad idea to make the investment in Secure CRT if you are actually going to be progressing. If you're serious about the tools that you're using, Secure CRT is a phenomenal tool. So the script is in there. So what's the last thing we need to do? Well, let's run it. tclsh, and it's called windex dash, and what did we change that name to? windex-script.tcl. So what we should see is on all 4 switches, it saves the configuration off so that we don't get prompted to save it later. And then let me hit enter a few times. So let's check. Did it do what it was supposed to do? Take a look at that. All 4 switches at one time. So I'm literally wiping the config. I'm setting all 4 of these switches back to the factory default. Now, I'm not going to make you sit and watch these reload. What we're going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and quickly talk about this script, and we'll just call this the baseline lab switch base config. And what does this do? Well, it basically gives us a bogus, sort of a placeholder for a name. And again, you can see the distribution layer switch. So that would be my multi-layer. If you're doing this, you may want to have one called 2960 baseline config, or for these multi-layers, 3560 baseline config, because when you go to sanitize the configurations, you want to make sure you take into account the fact that you're running different iOSs and the switches have different capabilities. But again, we'll run this on all the 3750s. So we're going to set the domain name. We're going to cancel the resolution of hostname to IPs from the command line, set our VTP mode to transparent, and then we're going to do some console configuration. Now, as you can see in the background here, let's take a look. Switch 1 is in the reload. We should see the same thing, and they should all be right about the same place. And they are. All right, so I am going to pause briefly here, and when these switches come back up, we're going to get onto them, and we're going to go ahead and cut and paste in our sort of baseline config that we would like to start all of our labs with. All right, so we'll be right back. All right, so all 4 of the switches came back literally almost at the same time. Again, these are all the exact same model switch, same memory, same everything. So, with the exception of the port count. But again, you can see all the switches are up. So, what we want to do now is for the labs, we would want to make sure that when we begin the labs, we throw these baseline settings on here, settings that we know we're going to use. So it's the same thing. We'll start out with that tcl-sh command. We're going to copy our script here, and again, I'm just dumping this into the Flash directory so that it's easily accessible. And we're going to come on to all of the switches here. We're going to say no. We're going to go into privilege exec, and that is where, and my startup disk is almost full, okay. And we'll say paste, hit enter. You can see it's going to go ahead and put that file in there, and so all we need to do now is type in, and I will just simply cut and paste the name of that file. Copy and paste. And again, I forgot, I need to put in tcl-sh at the beginning of the script. So let's go ahead and say tcl-sh, and then let's paste. All right, and it doesn't look like it's there. So let's take a look in the dir directory. Did it not paste the file? It looks like it didn't paste the file. Let's check and see here. Yeah, it's definitely not there. Let's grab this again here. Let's say copy and switch base config 3750. That should be it. Oops, sorry. We'll come down here. We'll put it on all the switches at the same time. And it's definitely putting them all in there at the same time. Aha, hold on. File names. All right. So, again, fortuitous failure here. Something I did not know. The file name for the tickle script, or I should say it's a Flash file system requirement, cannot be longer than 45 characters. All right. So let's go ahead and resolve that. Yeah, I did not know that. So let's just simply say base config 3750 script. How about that? All right, let's give that a go. Copy. We'll come back down here. Dump it onto all switches at the same time. And again, I missed that the first time it ran by. All right, so tcl-sh, and then the name of our script, which is less than 45 characters long for the Flash file system requirement there. So we'll come down here, tcl-sh, and then paste. There it is. And there you go. And it went that quick. It doesn't like the host name, but that's okay. So DLSW. Now, what we didn't do at the end of the script, you'll notice I didn't do a write memory here. So probably a good idea to drop in real quickly write memory. Again, you don't run that from privilege exec. You run it, or I'm sorry, from global config. You run it from privilege exec. So I don't need to precede it with iOS_config. So how would I update my script? Well, I simply save it, copy it again, come down here, and dump it into my window on all 4 switches, and that's it. It just overwrites the script that was already there. So in order to execute it, I simply type in tcl-sh, we give the name of the script, base config, come down here and say paste, hit enter, and there you go. They all should say building configuration. And the bad host name is okay because it's only a holder, but there you go. Take a look at that. I'm moving between all the switches, and we've got that baseline config. So now when I say write memory, I'm sorry, not write memory. I want to put something in here. Let's say write memory stuff, something that doesn't exist. You'll notice that the translation, it doesn't error out, right? This is where it would error before. It gives me that message right back, or I'm sorry, gives me my command line prompt right back, right? So we don't have to sit there and wait. And that's what that no domain or no IP domain lookup is doing for us. All right, the final thing that we're going to look at here is show SDM prefer. Did we get the desktop dual IPv4 IPv6 routing template? We did, and this is how you would see that. If I were to say SDM prefer and do a question mark, and actually let's get into global config here. SDM prefer question mark, here are the choices, right? If it's just an access layer switch, and the bias just means this is going to be an access layer switch. So my resources within the switch are going to be optimized for an access layer deployment. The default would be out of the box what the default is, but we want to do dual IPv4 IPv6, right? So when I said dual IPv4 IPv6, and also, do I want it to just be the default, or do we want it to be routing for IPv4 and IPv6? Again, you could pick VLAN bias if you think you're going to be using thousands of VLANs on here. But again, we just chose SDM prefer dual IPv4 IPv6. All right, so this is going to wrap up our baseline configuration lab. Again, very good idea to get these scripts written up while you're snowed in over the weekend here. For not this coming Monday, remember class is canceled, but for the following Monday. That way you hit the road running and you are ready to go. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Be safe out there if you have to travel this weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Is that February 1st already? Is that right? And date and time, what is that going to be? I think February 1st is going to be our actual first official meeting. And date and time preferences are dragging here. All right. Yes, I will see you all on February 1st at 6 o'clock. So have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon.